Another year of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is in the books, and with that, we get the opportunity to look back and rank the very best decks 2025 had to offer us. We'll be going over the best decks, mostly focusing on their results in the major TCG events, like the prestigious and difficult Yugioh Championship Series, and the nation-based World Championship Qualifiers, or YCS and WCQ for short. And kicking off the list at number 10, we have Crystron. While this archetype of element and mineral-based machine monsters might be a bit more notorious for its name association with the band Crystron Halki Fibrax, the archetype is more indicative of this year's biggest trend for Konami, printing legitimately good legacy support for decks just on the cusp of viability. Crystron makes its way just at the bottom of this list thanks to a single YCS win to go with a couple dozen topping performances and one WCQ victory to its name in 2025. Crystron always had powerful extenders like Smigger and Solfnir who could extend the deck's synchro plays out of the graveyard, but needed more consistent ways to either destroy them on the field to trigger their effects, or get them in the graveyard. Basically, the deck just needed some powerful starters and a little bit of a backbone to get going, and Konami provided both. The first with incredibly powerful starters, like Crystron Solvador, who has a double Foolish Burial effect for your Smigger and Solfnir. Or Crystron Tristaros, who, once summoned by other effects, gave you powerful quick synchro tools on your opponent's turn, and further graveyard extension as well as a great card to stop short and set up a modest series of interactions when staring down mulch armies. Maybe the card that brought the archetype together the best is the now limited continuous spell Crystron Inclusion, which did double consistency duty as it both searched a Crystron and, once you got it into the graveyard with any number of your destruction effects, could also reborn a Crystron out of the grave. So one card represents a powerful 2-for-1 starter and extender that's even very awkward to interact with, as destruction is usually one of the best ways to interact with a continuous spell, and it would only further Crystron's game plans. This newfound consistency and robustness to the Crystron engine allowed Crystrons to put up very powerful first turn boards chock full of negates, like FA Don Dragster and Cyber Dragon Infinity, thanks to the deck's level 5 shenanigans letting it easily make Cyber Dragon Nova. But the thing that really helped push Crystron over the top was the release of the K9 cards and Justice Hunters this year, a tentpole and format-defining set that Crystrons benefited greatly from. K9 is a rank 5 Xyz archetype that slots in great with Crystrons, thanks to Crystron's level 5s being able to get to the K9 cards through K917 or Ripper, and K9's inherent ability to play in your opponent's turn and making it an incredibly powerful engine going first and second. Going into a card like Ripper off of a K917 Izuna both gives you a negate to mess with your opponent's plays, and sets you up to search more K9 cards on your own turn. Hand trap and engine all in one, reminiscent of Tearlament's Havness, and with perfect synergy to fill out the deck in a level 5 and rank 5 heavy combo shell like Crystron. K9 itself has a bigger impact further up on the list, but this pairing was just right for Crystron to be the first of a few older archetypes to be revitalized into a top level competition in 2025. And at number 9 in this list, we have Atlantean Mermail. This blast from the past is another older deck that received a new wave of support just like Crystron, getting players to take another deep dive on this juggernaut from 2014 to turn into a 2025 contender. These various colors and flavors of fish racked up a little over 20 YCS tops, a win, 2 out of 3 winning decks for the 3v3 YCS, and even a pair of WCQ wins. This deck has a sort of inherent synergy between the two separate water archetypes. Their Mermails and the Atlanteans have abilities to discard or send other water monsters to the graveyard from hand, or sometimes the deck, as conditions for their summoning effects. To complement that, most of the relevant cards in both archetypes also reward you for sending them to the graveyard, often specifically for a water effect. For instance, an interaction that existed back in early 2010s and was relevant again this year was using Mermail Abystis to special summon itself from your hand by discarding another water monster and search a Mermail card when you do that. If you decided to send an Atlantean Dragoons, you could trigger its effect to add any Sea Serpent from your deck to your hand. So you get to search 2 cards, you special summon a guy for free, and discard 1 card in the process, netting you a free special and 1 extra card. These effects are all over the Atlantean Mermail cards. Most notably, there's super hard to deal with starter Nephthys the Atlantean Prince, who gets to send from deck to the graveyard as cost to search, making it incredibly hard to interact with as hand traps rarely work against cost effects. But that's just the foundation of solid cards that work even in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! What that foundation needed was modern support and a modern game plan, Abyss Shrine, the Atlantean Spirit, was a big piece of legacy support that gave the deck an extreme consistency boost, giving it another tribute from hand style effect that bridged Mermail and Atlantean together by searching or special summoning any card from either archetype from deck and giving you an extra draw on your opponent's turn. This, plus the already highly consistent engine, gave the deck a pretty consistent way to get through to any card in the deck, most notably Atlantean Dragoons. While Dragoons could search almost any Mermail or Atlantean with its ability to search Sea Serpents, the real danger came in searching other Sea Serpents who weren't in those archetypes. Notable inclusions are Super Ancient Deep Sea King Colacanth, who has always represented an absurd, game-breaking combo state if you can consistently access it, or Molenglacia the Elemental Lord, which Mermail could easily set up with its restrictive summoning requirement to hand rip your opponent for 2 cards. Combine that with the easy to slot in Deep Sea Minstrel, and your opponent being forced to play with 3 cards stripped from their hand was a common sight. Even less if they used any hand traps. And since Deep Sea Minstrel banishes a card from your opponent's hand, that enables Deep Sea Prima Donna to special summon out Barrier Statue of the Torrents from your deck if you wanted to add a Floodgate Dessert to your hand rip entree. And it had more interaction beyond that. If that wasn't enough, since this is a pure water deck, it even got to sport the super powerful new, but restrictive, hand trap Dominus Impulse, which favors decks that stick to dark, water, and fire attributes for its monster effects. Mermail Atlantean made a pretty big splash this year, especially for a deck everyone considered long past its prime. Another deck risen from the depths thanks to huge waves of legacy support dredging up and raising the tide for the Sea Dwellers. And at number 8, we have Memento. This archetype is a series of retrains, or just really homages, of very old school normal monsters from the earliest days of Yu-Gi-Oh!, like Momentalin Horned Dragon being a reference to Tri-Horned Dragon. Despite being a bunch of throwbacks to the simplest and weakest kinds of monsters, this is one of the most complicated and difficult decks to pilot in recent memory to get your money's worth. Each of the Mementos has various destruction triggers, summon triggers, graveyard setups, and extremely hard to navigate sequences to get the most out of their effects, with completely different lines based entirely on what combinations of names you have. The basic premise of the deck is that every card has hard to plan for extension effects off of each other, letting a skilled pilot play through a ton of interaction and set up big payoff cards like Creation King, who can both send 3 Mementos to your graveyard and then functionally board wipe your opponent by popping as many cards they control as monsters you control. It backs this up with help from generic fusion boss monsters like Guardian Chimera, who can transform the extreme value the Mementos generate over a turn into another series of destruction effects thanks to the quick play fusion spell card Momental Infusion, summoned in on your opponent's turn. Speaking of their fusion, the deck often revolves around both this card as a fusion spell and as a recurring value engine, as it can banish itself from the graveyard to destroy a monster and then search another Memento spell. You can use this to either set up Momental Infusion, turning on its ability to fuse using the graveyard as material if a monster was destroyed, or just to trigger an effect like Momentalin Akihiron to add back a memento from the grave. The complicated nature of this deck meant it wasn't played quite as much as any other deck on this list in sheer numbers, but it was still able to put up 2 YCS wins despite under 20 tops. That's nothing short of an incredible conversion rate, and it even snatched a couple of small WCQs to boot. It wasn't nearly as big a part of the metagame as the other decks on this list, but no deck finds itself taking down 2 YCS wins in this day and age without some serious oomph backing it up. And our first returning member from last year's list, we have Fiendsmith at number 7. It shouldn't be too much of a surprise given how Fiendsmith took over much of the metagame in the later half of 2024, and it continued to impact it into 2025. Just like with last year, Fiendsmith is a bit difficult to rank. If you include technically every deck that was playing any Fiendsmith cards for a basic Fiendsmith package, you end up with over 140 appearances of Engraver and his posse in top cuts at YCS, winning 2 and featuring in 1 3v3's winners list. And it even had a solid WCQ success, winning 2 in one of the larger, more prestigious continental level WCQs, paired it with the new Orcus support. And that's kind of the issue with Fiendsmith, as it's almost always a supporting partner for another deck to shore up its weaknesses or just synergize well with it. It naturally pairs with so many decks, like being able to make both a rank 4 for Ryzeal, and Ryzeal being able to make Excited Knight for easy Fiendsmith access. Not to mention any deck that, for much of the year, had a spare couple of monsters lying around the board to go into Moon of the Closed Heaven could access the full Fiendsmith line, which would eventually get Moon a spot on the ban list and Fiendsmith Lacrima an unbanning at the same time thanks to the change of the time rules. That said, there were plenty of appearances where Fiendsmith was the driving force behind the deck, such as Fiendsmith Primide or Bestial Control Shells, or even actual Light Fiend-centered decks like Magical Musketeers and Live Twins, the latter of which was one of the YCS winning decks. Even with Moon banned, the Excite-Night line or these inherent Light Fiend synergies kept Fiendsmith viable through most of the year to give it these superb results, and it's not a surprise, given nearly any deck can benefit from the board-breaking potential of Engraver, and the powerful negation-based endboard pieces like DDD Wave King High Caesar and Fiendsmith Desiree. It's hard to rank any higher on this list given how reliant it is on other strategies to truly function, but it definitely earned its return spot on this year's best of the best list. And through the looking glass at number 6, we have Maliss. This Alice in Wonderland and computer virus themed Cybers deck has a particular gimmick of all of their effects revolving and triggering around banishment. Most of the main deck monsters like Dormouse and White Rabbit special summon themselves when banished, and the various effects of the Maliss cards do the banishing. It also makes generic cards like Gold Sarcophagus and Allure of Darkness function as direct starters to special summon them, giving the deck an absurd number of starters and extenders when the engine alone was already consistent enough. And it uses that consistency to make a truly absurd Link Climb combo that you would only expect from a Cybers deck. This banishment theme also makes the deck incredibly frustrating to deal with. For instance, a consistency piece like Gold Sarcophagus or the field spell Maliss and Underground can't be interacted with by the ever-present Ash Blossom, since it gets to the cards by banishing them and that dodges Ash Blossom. Meaning, not only was this capable of putting up powerful Link end boards featuring the likes of Allied Code Talker Attic Nister, Firewall Dragon, and their own banish-happy boss monster Heart Scriptor, but interacting with them in normal ways was very ineffective. And the deck also draws tons of cards, whether it be off of Chessy Cat drawing 2 or White Binder drawing 1, so it was always backing up absurd end boards with a hand stacked with hand traps. Like the aforementioned Dominus Impulse, since Maliss has the good fortune to be an entirely dark archetype. The deck even gets to cheat being able to use all of its trap cards the turn that they're set, so long as they banish a Maliss monster you control, something the deck already wants to do. So it should be no surprise that, as the newest deck coming into 2025, Maliss had an incredible year of top cut performances, with over 150 topping YCS appearances. The problem is, while interacting with Maliss the normal way can be tricky, the deck does have one of the most obvious Achilles heels since Dimension Shifter plagued Tearlaments format, that being Artifact Lancea, and it basically works the same way, but by stopping banishing instead of forcing everything to be banished. A deck whose entire engine relies on banishing for any single effect to work does functionally nothing under Artifact Lancea used by your opponent, which prohibits all banishes for the turn. And with Maliss clearly the most powerful deck in the early part of 2025, every single player in every tournament had 3 of the floodgates somewhere in their deck list. Maliss didn't have Tearlament's robust nature to help it out of their jam either. So despite those 150 tops, it never actually won a single YCS. Always the bridesmaid and never the bride. It's one of the most disappointing performances for one of the most powerful and dominant decks ever. And that lack of being able to actually close out on the biggest stages does hurt its ranking a little bit. Don't feel too bad for these Cybers viruses though, as the WCQ season was much kinder to them. Maliss was arguably the best deck of the WCQ season, winning 11 WCQs at the national level and 2 of the continental level. With just a little more gold on their necks at the YCS level, we might have seen Maliss closer to the top of this list, but as it stands, they'll have to settle for being the best of the bottom half. And now, with the number 5 spot on this list, we have Dracotail. This is a fusion-based archetype that focuses explicitly on fusing with monsters from hand. And while that does seem like how fusion summoning is supposed to work, modern fusion spells more often than not look to increase the power level by avoiding that inherent card disadvantage caused by fusing purely from cards you already have, looking for cards either in your deck or graveyard to fulfill their cause. Dracotail embraces traditional fusion summoning a bit more and makes up for the disadvantage by offsetting it with preposterous advantage created when fusion summoning. All of the main Dracotails have the ability to set a Dracotail spell or trap card when used as a fusion material. And while this does work when they are sent from the deck to the graveyard to fuse off of the branded fusion-esque Rahu Dracotail, the main boss monster of the deck, Dracotail Arthalion, requires one or more monsters from your hand as fusion materials alongside any Dracotail name. Then it rewards you by bouncing an amount of monsters from either field or graveyard back to the hand, equal to the number of monsters you fused away from your hand. This means Arthalion can both clear a board, interact with your opponent's graveyard, and, most importantly, add back every card you use to fuse it with to your own hand. This makes it so you can use your own hand trap monsters as fusion materials and stack them back to your hand, solving one of the more awkward modern Yu-Gi-Oh conundrums of hand traps not contributing to your deck's engine. Or you can infinitely recur them as you grind through the powerful and endless Dracotail recursions, returning spent hand traps after using them on prior turns to keep your opponent's plays under wraps. The way the deck usually plays out is you get a ton of chain-blocked value effects for fusing out your big Arthalion, set a bunch of trap cards for easy interaction that also draws you cards, the Dracotail spell cards for extension and follow-up, and sometimes stock up on a giant hand full of hand traps. All in very few summons, so the deck plays especially well against those dastardly mulch armies. There's more intricacies, such as the bigger dragons also giving you secondary interaction effects when fusing, or their secondary fusion monsters, Dracotail Gulamel, being another piece of interaction out of the extra deck. But this is all high value, quick, powerful, and low to the ground interaction that plays well going first or second. It even does the modern Yu-Gi-Oh hand trap in engine maneuver like K9 and Tearlaments with Dracotail Phimena, who can fuse as a quick effect from hand. And because it's a fusion archetype, it's had a ton of success splashing a small branded fusion package in. After all, nothing stops you from sending a Dracotail name along with an Albaz for branded fusion and setting a Ketu or Rahu in the process. This is arguably the most successful variant, being the 2 YCS winning variants of Dracotail amongst its 80 or so topping performances. Had Justice Hunters dropped a little bit earlier in the year, there's a good chance Dracotail could make it higher on this list, as it's still one of the best decks going into 2026, and has plenty of chances to improve upon an already great first few months in the spotlight. And next up at number 4 on this list, we have Mitsurugi. This is a doubly rare sight on the year-end ranking, as not only is it rare for ritual decks to make much of an impact, it's even more rare for TCG debut archetypes to do so. And on top of that, it's a reptile-based deck, arguably the worst monster type in the game before Mitsurugi did so well this year. But that's enough gushing about the oddity of the deck. Let's get down to how it works. Every ritual deck more or less has to fix the 2 major problems with the ritual decks, which is the basic premise of ritual summoning is its ridiculous 3-card combo, where you need the ritual monster, ritual spell, and the materials all in rotation just to summon out one monster. Mitsurugi, like all the previous good ritual decks in Yu-Gi-Oh's history, solves this problem by cheating the restriction or gaining insane value at every curve. First, by getting around the cost of tributing, basically every Mitsurugi monster pluses you when tributed. Whether it's Aramasa searching a monster or Saji searching a spell, every monster in the deck is basically a better version of Cyber Angel Ben 10. A ritual monster so good that a few years ago we called it the best ritual monster ever at the time, for how it helps you deal with the weaknesses of ritual summoning. And the ritual monsters themselves, if correctly summoned, all give you searches and summon themselves back from the graveyard when tributed. So the costs have been mitigated. But what about the 3-card combo consistency problem? Well, ritual decks inherently get broken support because of these issues like pre-preparation of rides, but Mitsurugi goes a step further by just letting the main ritual monster of the deck, Habakiri, also search out all of your main deck monsters by summoning them and tributing a reptile with Habakiri's in-hand effect. It's like a souped up Necroz of Bryonic and you don't even have to discard it. This usually lets you go through Saji, who gets you access to the last piece of the puzzle that lets you cheat the ritual summoning mechanic, Mitsurugi Ritual. This is basically just branded fusion for Mitsurugi ritual monsters, except twice in the same turn. One effect lets you ritual summon from hand by tributing from deck, and the other lets you ritual summon from deck by tributing from hand or field. Either way, the ritual is cheating one half of the requirements. And with the deck's main boss monsters in Marakumo and Futsu giving you negates off the trap card, quick effect board nukes off of Mitsurugi Prayers with Marakumo, and infinite recursion off of Futsu, it's both resilient and powerful in every stage of the game. Suffice to say, the TCG designers went out of their way to really make this deck work. And maybe went a bit too far out of their way, as now access to Habakiri lets any player basically stitch together any combo they can imagine, because the Mitsurugi cards put out so much material without any locks or even any extra deck requirements. This becomes doubly problematic as Habakiri is generically searchable off of King of the Feral Imps, making the archetype a natural pair with, you guessed it, Ryzeal. But that didn't stop Mitsurugi from being incredibly dominant in its own right. While it shared a lot of its topping positions in lists with Fiendsmith, Ryzeal, and most recently Yummy variants, the deck functioned incredibly well on its own this year, overall putting up similar results to Maliss with 150 topping appearances in YCSs to go along with 4 wins, and a staggering 15 WCQ wins. Some of the credit goes to those archetypes paired with it, but this isn't just one of the best decks of the year. It's easily the greatest ritual deck of all time. It's set an incredibly high bar to match and easily deserves its place as one of the best decks of the year. Next up at number 3 in this list, we have Yummy. This is a confectioned and arcade claw game themed Link and Synchro deck. Its main archetypal gimmick is completely cheating the synchro summoning mechanic by using Link monsters instead of tuners. And if history has taught us anything, cheating an extra deck mechanic is one of the best ways to break the game. Looking at you, Zodiac and Contact Fusions. Releasing in the second half of the year alongside K9 and Dracotail and Justice Hunters, Yummy arguably had the best TCG season of the second half, racking up 3 YCS wins and over 120 topping performances. A staggering success given how it only got to play in roughly half the YCSs this year. Yummy accomplished the success with its extra deck cheating, and it cheats by having Synchro 2 monsters that are able to use any Link 1 as if they were a level 1 tuner. This means you can pair any level 1 non-tuner monster with any level 1 monster to go into a Yummy Synchro, which then goes into any Yummy line you want thanks to Cup's Yummy's wave searching into 2 Yummy monsters from your deck. And since all the Yummies can special summon themselves once they've got either a Link 1 or Synchro 2, you can imagine how many different non-Yummy setups instantly get you to a Yummy combo. The most popular would be Sky Striker and Mitsurugi. Sky Striker just comes equipped with an easy to search and special summon level 1 in Hornet drones, and an archetype full of Link 1s. Turning drones into Kagari, getting back drones, and summoning another drone, you've got a Yummy Synchro. Mitsurugi, well, we've already talked enough about them. Suffice to say, they can put up as much material as you want, and that's also an easy Yummy combo. It even got to abuse one of the most broken cards ever in the right deck, Obedience Schooled, which is just a triple emergency teleport for low-level beast monsters, and that includes all of the Yummies. And since Yummy's low-level level 1s and Synchro 2 tuner monsters are the core of the deck's combo line, it also has easy access to Herald of the Arclight, a powerful floodgate and omni-negate for sure, but you can also just link it off and search for a Habakiri with its graveyard effect. The final thing that makes Yummy tick is the closest thing they have to a boss monster in their Link 1, Yummy Snatchy, who both searches either of their field spells on summon for extension or destruction-based interaction. It can also perform quick synchros on your opponent's turn with no once per turn restricting it. This lets you access the double Book of Moon Yummy Synchro Cookie Yummy Way, or just flood the board with bodies to further synchroing with Lollipop Yummy Way. And all of the Synchro 2s have quick effect tagouts whenever your opponent does basically anything, insulating their own effects from targeting negation by putting themselves back into the extra and summoning back 2 Yummy monsters from your graveyard to trigger powered up versions of their already great normal effects. Yummy has a very powerful and very sticky playstyle and has been a match for its release partners in K9 and Dracotail despite not having their in-engine hand trap style effects that let them play on both players' turns. They make up for that difference in power on both turns by having a ton of options and consistency on your turn. Yummy is arguably the best deck in the format right now with its Mitsurugi variants, and is in a great position to make a big splash in 2026, as it did in 2025. Now, sound the sirens for the penultimate spot on this list, it's K9 Vanquish Soul. This deck is sort of a culmination of 2025, where the 2 biggest themes of the year were just how good the Justice Hunter decks were, and how much excellent legacy support older archetypes got. and none benefited more than Vanquish Soul. Prior to 2025, Vanquish Soul topped out as a competent, but somewhat hard to pilot and a little awkward Tier 2 deck from 2023. Their main gimmick of tagging each other out from the field with its hand effects is great for pushing their interaction, but needing specific types in hand, Dark, Fire, and Earth, to trigger their best effects, was often awkward, with the best Earth options being the Vanquish Souls you either didn't want to play, or at most a one-of. This all changed with the release of Vanquish Soul Holy Sue, a super powerful level 5 Earth monster that can search out your Vanquish Soul Ryzeal to start your plays, or take control of your opponent's monsters. And this in-hand effect is a quick effect, giving the deck a combination in-engine hand trap and play starter. If that sounds familiar, then you might be remembering the earlier entry on this list that also had K9 in it, as K917 Izuna also functions similarly, being both a starter and functional hand trap on your opponent's turn. And would you look at that, all of the relevant K9 monsters like Jokul, Norori, Lupus, and the others all are dark and earth monsters, exactly what Vanquish Soul wants. And it doesn't hurt that Vanquish Soul also easily produces rank 5s thanks to Holy Sue and Yugioh, being level 5s with easy summoning conditions. Much like with K9 Crystron, the Vanquish Soul side of the deck accesses the K9 parts excellently due to being able to create their rank 5 starter in K917 Ripper. Vanquish Soul also got a critical consistency piece in their field spell, Vanquish Soul Start. This turned Vanquish Soul Dr. Mad Love from an inclusion you play just to search your trap for your end board into a great starter and extender. If you look at the YCS results, this might seem a bit high for K9 versus. This specific pairing only has around 50 YCS tops and 2 wins. A great performance, no doubt, but that would put it just behind its sister Jester Hunter deck Dracotail and Yummy on results. And without the K9 half of the deck, the new VS cards don't make much of an impact in the WCQ season or the first half of YCS season. That would still get it a spot on this list, but not this high. But K9 Vanquish Soul gets one more big boost for taking down the most important tournament of the year, winning the 2025 Yu-Gi-Oh! World Championship. Any deck that wins Worlds gets a spot on this list regardless, and K9 VS would have been worth of a top spot on its own merits without that. It's still one of the best decks in the format despite multiple consistency and payoff hits on the ban list, and won the final YCS of the year before we go into 2026, so it's still at the top of the metagame. The deck had an all-around excellent year, but not even the World Championship is enough to give K9 Vanquish Soul a leg up on our final deck. And exceeding all expectations with the number 1 spot on this list, we have another returning deck in Ryzeal. Specifically, Mitsurugi Ryzeal with a little nod to the rank 4 focus Automat Legacy support. Ryzeal got number 4 on last year's list despite its late introduction to 2024. But that late introduction in 2024 meant an early introduction to 2025. Everything we said about the deck last year remains true. The deck can extend for ages, with nearly every main deck monster like X and Sword being great starters and extenders for any rank 4 plays, as well as having unusual and effective board-breaking interactions and a super tight engine that allows a lot of hand traps, splashes, or other going second staples. It plays low to the ground and can put up a reasonable and durable board with a Ryzeal Detonator attached with an Eclipse Twins and very few summons to make the ever-present Mulcharbies minimal problems. And the things that made it just squeak onto the list at the tail end of 2024 had it dominate through much of 2025. So if it's all the same, did anything change for Ryzeal in 2025 to make it succeed so much? Well, we've already mentioned one huge thing that changed for Ryzeal, and that was the introduction of Mitsurugi. Much like Fiendsmith before it, Mitsurugi's ability to slot in and find basically any synergy with other decks due to its ease of access has made it a very present part of multiple decks, with Ryzeal benefiting most of all. Ryzeal loves making rank 4s, so King of the Feral Imps being a generic rank 4 that searches any reptile means you can do your full Ryzeal combo with plenty of materials left over to make one more rank 4 and add yourself an easy Habakiri, and leveraging that into full Mitsurugi combo to fill in whatever minor weakness Ryzeal's end board and board breaking potential might have. Likewise, Mitsurugi cranks out a ton of level 4s to the field to summon a Ryzeal Duo Drive and set up the entire Ryzeal board from the other direction. And if you want a balls to the wall combo variant of Ryzeal, the new Automat support ended up letting the deck do a Mermail impression by looping Evil Swarm Ouroboros hand rips over and over until Konami was forced to ban the card. The same goes for Arch Nemesis Protoss, who Ryzeal got rebanned thanks to Infernal Flame Banshee line, making it too easy to access in a top deck once again. Ryzeal had tons of success earlier in the year, largely winning its rivalry with Maliss before the new decks and Justice Hunter changed the meta, and fared much better than its rival once those new decks popped up, thanks to its incredible synergies with Mitsurugi. Ryzeal put up by far the best regular performances of the year, totaling best in both YCS wins and tops, taking home 4 wins, 4 further winning lists across 2 3v3 YCSs, and over 170 topping performances. And it also has the second best WCQ performance, winning 13 national WCQs and 1 continental. Technically more total WCQs won than Maliss, but you could argue Maliss's second continental win gave it just a slight edge in the WCQ season. Still, Ryzeal's utter dominance of the YCSs and its ability to actually win them while outperforming Maliss both before and after Justice Hunters changed everything is what clinches the year for the deck. You could look at Ryzeal and say a lot of its performance was down to the Mitsurugi half of the deck, but the funny thing about that is every other deck just below it is also a 2 archetype combo, whether it be Dracotail with Branded, Yummy with Mitsurugi, or K9 with Vanquish Soul or Crystron. While the K9, Yummy, and Dracotail variants are carrying their successes into 2026, there's little doubt the deck of 2025 was Ryzeal.